I'm just gonna pop in and say hi. I think that we're just about wrapping up here, so hopefully people come over and say hi. I'm gonna pull the tab as well. Okay, so we're now officially in the other portion of the live Q&A. So yeah, there were a couple questions that got asked during the pre-recorded part. So I figure, oh cool, and yep, Chadwick just added as well the question from before. Thank you for doing that. And the question is, would you recommend using a photo format on a drone to capture some kind of like radiance field data set for a commercial film? Definitely, I would say that the answer to that would be yes. A lot of the principles will still apply here, where you really want to be flying pretty slowly and capturing things with a high shutter speed, really wanting to freeze individual frames in time. But yeah, I would say that drone photography would be a great data set choice for capturing, especially for use in like virtual production.
Yeah, I'd also add on that. I think it was mentioned DNG slash JPEG slash DNG. If you're trying to do film production, I would capture in that raw format, even if that's not what you train your data in. Not everything will be able to use DNG format, but the fact that you can then go in and expose those darks and bring down the lights and have more dynamic range in your imagery, um, it's like you can capture more data and work with it and get the best output, or you can get worse data, but you can't get better. So like JPEG already is compressing a lot of that imagery, and you can't go backwards. So if you're trying to do professional work, yeah, get the best possible. Even if you don't end up using it at the end, you can't go back and capture it unless you're already there.
Yeah, and so we've got, or actually, we got one other question, but before we get to the most recent one, which was relighting or object modification. And so I would say that relighting is still a little bit of like a difficult thing to do in the world of radiance fields, though there are a couple plugins that have been coming out over the last like month or so, or that have been announced. So most of them are feeding into the world of Unreal Engine. So if you take a look at Valinga's Unreal Engine plugin, or there's a company out of Japan called Preferred Networks. Their plugin is not yet available, but both of these are starting to be able to do some kind of relighting. You can also take a look at Houdini as well with the GSOPs, the Gaussian Splatting Operators plugin. It is free and does let you do some image-based relighting on there. And hopefully we'll start to see a bit more relighting options as well. It's definitely a very hot topic. One other way that you could do this actually is EA has a plugin called Mesh to Splat, where you're starting with a traditional 3D model in this scenario, but you're able to convert it very, very quickly, and then you're able to then relight your capture pretty easily. And on the object modification side, there's definitely softwares that exist like Play Canvas's Super Splat, where you can go and you can actually select either individual objects or down to the individual like splats themselves and be able to either move or translate, rotate, do something with these things. And another option that you could also consider for this would be the Viewer Godzilla Pro as well, which also lets you have some of these segmentation functionalities and kind of like modify things.
Now, not in the realm of what's available today, but what we've seen in research. You have to talk about the Gaussians in the dark, and it was like nerfs in the dark as well. That was a way to capture using, again, we're getting back to raw imagery. You can capture in raw, and it'll process the data in raw, and then you could do like your post processing of your Gaussian splats, and like literally turn almost a night scene into day, because you have all that preserved light information. And that's all kind of research still. I think Google has been spearheading that. So I would say, like, right now, like you said, Michael, not a lot of options, and it's kind of like coming online. But I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing more and more options to capture in RAW and special film coloring and things like that, and be able to do this post process in the Gaussian splats directly. It's just kind of, they're still trying to figure out the 3D part as best they can before they move on to like some of those special tasks.
Yeah, definitely. And Jonathan, do you want to take the next question about ray tracing based Gaussians or other radiance representations?
Okay, yeah, I have 2 YouTube videos on that. So if you want 3 three, and you have one. So if you want to get, if you there's called NVIDIA put out two papers. One's called 3D Gaussian ray tracing, and then 3D Gaussian unscented transforms. And then I believe some people have been kind of playing around with ray tracing as well, but not published papers. But instead of using like the classical way that we showed of making like the whole scene is a bunch of Gaussians, these ellipsoids. Instead, it's like ray tracing through the scene particles that using a ray tracer to create these particles that ends up becoming these splats. And one of the beauties of that is that because using a ray tracer, there's ways that they can then like fix for issues with your capture. And number one being if that you have a fisheye camera, be it circular or the like flat projected one where everything's kind of like really widely distorted, you can't use those in Gaussian splat creation, which is kind of a big downside if you want to be really fast. But the ray tracer is able then to compensate for that distortion and basically ray trace the rays with that model of the camera, and then you get actually a really good output. So now where I was capturing some rooms, like at my kitchen, I think it captured like 50 photos, and it's got this big kitchen island in there. So a lot of occlusions. And then I think it took me like hundreds of photos to do that same thing with just the ultra wide on my iPhone. So taking still a wide camera. So that's one thing it does, but then also can fix effects like rolling shutter. So again, you're moving fast with the drone or you're walking around taking video, you get all these rolling shutter effects. That ray tracing technology then is able to compensate and basically erase all that, the rolling shutter that will make all your outputs kind of look a little skewed and not perfect. So I think it's interesting because it's now out there. If you go find Gaussian ray tracing, you're not going to get better results than you would with PostShot or one of these other software as far as like what's the best one, but it's more flexible. And so if you don't have perfect imagery or you're using wide distortion camera lenses, this will solve it. And then it also, there's even some post processing effects that they do where you can like change your exposure and depth and stuff like that straight in the Gaussians, which is really cool. But I'd say go find, if you type in 3D Gaussian ray tracing, you're going to find a Windows and a Linux tutorial I created. And they're running, I think if you're watching this live right now, there's a sweepstakes and NVIDIA's running to win a free GPU. So, go look into that.
Yeah, it's very cool. You can start to introduce some really cool secondary lighting effects like refraction, reflections inside of the scene itself. So it's like if you have a reproduction of this room here, but you want to see like the back of my head for some reason, if you put a mirror right behind me in the splat or the radiance for the capture, you can actually see it reflected, which is very crazy that it's stuff that we can do already. So
and you can even reproject the data after the fact too. So maybe you capture it, you project it as like a 2D frame like you normally look at with a normal camera. Then you can reproject it back into like a 360 view again, and then make it into some immersive view output. But I think we're a little early on some of that, but it's part of GSplat now. So it's all open source, which is great. So if you happen to be a developer on here, you can use that to your heart's content and not have to worry about paying huge licensing fees.
Yeah, and so for the next question, do we have or are we planning to create some kind of community forum or chat for ARC like Discord? Yes, we definitely will. So I would say, sign up for just the newsletter or to like register for the website, and we will distribute that as soon as possible. That I think we can get set up probably by at the end of today or at the latest tomorrow. So definitely stay tuned pretty imminently for that. To go back to Ryan as well, saw a keynote from Otoy where I think Jules was talking about incorporating radiance fields into Octane Render. And so, yes, so Octane Render in the 2026.1, I think, alpha does have Gaussian splatting support, which is a very cool version of it, where it is a fully path-traced version of Gaussian splatting. I got to see a talk that he did late last year as well, where they were showing some examples from the Huntington Garden in splat form within Octane. So I'm hoping to see some really cool stuff from Otoy on that side. And yeah, it definitely is making its way into the Otoy environment.
Yeah, I just posted a link to you can search Otoy Octane Render Gaussian splats. You're going to find that Michael's covered it in an article back in January.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
posted that link there if you want to go right to it.
Thank you. Okay, next question is my outdoor splats struggle with reconstructing the sky or very distant elements slash large scenes. Certainly because if the camera looks straight up at a clear sky, there's nothing there. So there's potentially two parts to this question that I think of. One, is just like taking a look at, well, actually there's a few parts. The first one is, are you trying to capture like the details in the far background, such as like a city, or are there like trees or some things in the vast distance? And I think a lot of that comes down to the actual like model and method in which you are trying to run with. Potentially the vanilla Gaussian splatting won't do a great job at this, whereas like if you're starting to tweak some of the things, like if you're using like Nerf Studio and you're starting to use different models, I'm trying to recall which one was best for like really distant objects. I think there's one called like Hogs, which is currently looking at being merged into GSplat, which I think does this pretty nicely. But there are some methods that are better than others. The other way that you could take a look. Oh yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
No, you keep me on our line.
Okay, the other
My
way.
2 cents at the end.
Okay. Depending on if, like, say there's a bunch of clouds or something that are shifting over, a given period in time while you're capturing, that's a little bit harder to deal with because then you're really just kind of at the mercy of the shifting sky. And, as you move around the scene, the radiance field will reconstruct what it sees from that given angle. So, I'd say that keeping that in mind, if you can help it, when you go to capture will hopefully make a big difference. And the other thing, too, is that you can try to expose for the sky and just try and get that like blue detail back in there so that it's properly exposed, and then perhaps pairing it with something like the bilateral guided radiance fields, which will kind of disentangle the exposure settings a bit.
Okay, so my 2 cents on this is okay. So there's actually I'm gonna decouple. There's two issues you kind of pulled up here. Your outdoor splats with the sky and very distant elements. So those are two different problems. The distant element's got a lot of detail. It could be like mountains or buildings off in the distance. The sky is just featureless, blank canvas. Maybe you have some clouds, but there's not a lot there for it to go off of. And so is when it comes to the sky, if you want to capture as much of the sky as possible, you want to get like a vertical shot, so think portrait, and you want to get a really wide angle, but you also have to get a lot of other objects to get parallax, because if you're just capturing the sky, it has no idea where those camera positions are because nothing's unique. And to be able to figure out where that sky is in the general 3D scene, it needs to know where those cameras were pointed. So if you just have sky, you just even have clouds, it's going to really struggle to figure out, because clouds, by the way, move. It's going to figure out like where is that camera pointing straight up. But if you have, let's say, half of your wide angle lens is looking at the sky and maybe more towards the horizon, it's gonna say, oh, I start to see unique features. It'll start to figure out where those are. So that will help. So what you can also do is, again, PostShot's a great example where you can add a sky sphere as part of the options, and it'll just take the color around the like top edges of your splat and then project like a sphere like they do in a game engine. So they'll basically make that up, the sky, for you as a splat. So that's one way to fill in the sky, which is awesome. When it comes to distant features, again, you don't like things are really far off. These models are going to want to really, if it's got a lot of good parallax on features, it's going to get you good detail. The problem is if something's, I don't know, quarter mile away, miles away, kilometers away, you don't have a lot of parallax, which means like if I move even 20 feet over to my right and take a photo and move another 20 feet over the right as I'm doing that, the relative to movement of the background, there's not much. So it doesn't have as much different angles to create a really detailed background. So that is one problem there. And there is, again, as Michael said, there's different models that are helping solve that problem. The best one I have personally used is convex splatting. And what's exciting about that is that I see, again, there's a branch within GSplat that hopefully is merged like in the next week with the main GSplat. So all these, like, I would say, research really far out there, new methods that'll really solve some of these problems are going to be in GSplat first, probably, and then we'll maybe see it in PostShot or in other software. I can't speak to things like Varo's Teleport, which is really good, and Polycam, all those different ones, what they're doing. But I know some of them have sky spheres as well. But for the backgrounds, they might be incorporating that same research as well, but we don't get to know that.
Yeah, and one other one that just came out recently too, which would do a great job with this, is the deformable beta splatting as well, which is kind of the latest radiance representation that does a pretty good job. It looks seems
Yeah.
like
I'll
at
probably
the
be one of
back
my
end.
next videos, by the way, covering that. And that's the interesting thing about that is supposedly they're really good at specular reflections as well. So
Yeah, so there's a lot of really cool research, both coming out and yeah, getting built on top of like within GSplat. So
and as we mentioned, Gaussians are just one primitive. I think there's going to be better ones in the future, ones that are not ellipsoids that'll better reproduce what you're trying to do. And maybe it'll be a mix and match. Maybe pick the right one for your project. The battle will be getting a render that does it all. But
yeah, yeah, exactly. So next question, or this is a comment. It may be possible to achieve an accurate model by first processing the data set in Reality Capture. Yes, so I would highly recommend that people do their structure from motion part of the reconstruction pipeline within Reality Capture. You get I've seen some really very high fidelity examples coming from the work that's being aligned first in Reality Capture as opposed to running it natively through something like Colmap or just like dropping your images straight into PostShot first. If you really create a strong like dense point cloud prior to starting the training portion, you can get some very, very compelling results out of that.
um, just again, Google reality capture, Gaussian splatting, something like that, and you will find there's a really short video from uh, someone who has made a tutorial on how to process and export the right file types. I think it's like a 7-minute video. He probably could have made it 3, but it doesn't take very long. And Colmap can be more accurate overall. You might find that you use reality capture and you put in, let's say, 500 images. It'll be much faster than in Colmap when you get up in those higher image counts. But you might, in the end, realize that it'll end up with disconnected models. So you'll end up with maybe 380 out of the 500 images actually solved. And so you can try to like manually add tie points, things like that, which gets really complicated. If you know what you're doing, go for it. But if not, you might not be able to use all your images. Where Colmap might take like a day to figure this out, but it'll get all the images. So I would always go for the speed though, because I would hate for you to run it for a day to find out that like it didn't work in the first place.
Yeah, but the whole structure for motion part of the pipeline is very critical,
Yeah.
and it would not surprise me if in the next like month or two we start to see a lot more providers and people who are providing some
Um,
kind of enhanced service
I
on
keep
this side.
seeing more and more of these foundational model ones that they're using AI to enable faster speed ups on getting camera solved. So you're seeing like real time slam where you're able to like literally feed it images, and as you're feeding it images, is figuring out the poses, creating a point cloud in real time, which is really cool. So we'll see more and more of that as those become more popular.
Yeah, agreed. So I don't see any more questions in the chat, but if you have any other questions that you want us to go through, just feel free to put them into the chat box. Otherwise, we'll probably I guess call it here.
Yeah, when you get that Discord spun up, that'd be a great place to ask questions. And I'm
Yes.
always making tutorial videos. So if there's a tutorial video you want made or some news coverage of something, Michael's good at getting exclusive coverage with all the different people doing research. So yeah, lots of good content coming out if you guys follow that Discord.
Yeah, so if you guys found value in today's webinar and Q&A, definitely let us know any feedback, or if you didn't find value as well, that's maybe even more important to let us know. And we can hopefully, create something that will be very helpful for the larger community and help everything grow and accelerate a little bit, because, the technology we feel like is very compelling at this point, and we really want to make this information accessible and approachable for everyone. Let's see. Oh, meet up soon, hopefully. Yeah, New York Tech Week would be a great idea. I mean, I'm here in Manhattan, so is Nitin, and so perhaps, yeah, that could be a great time to do something. And Arvin, I believe, will be at AWE, so I guess stay tuned. We'll talk to them about that. Cool.
All right. Thanks for
Awesome.
putting this together, Michael.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much for coming on, and thanks everyone for listening in. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Cool. Thank you.